So in this session, we have two speakers. The session is called Dark Heritage in Digital Spaces, and our speakers are Tessa Bouwman from the Bergen-Belsen Memorial and Dr. Victoria Grace Walden from the University of Sussex. So over to you, Tessa and Victoria.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming to our session. We originally designed this, or our original thinking behind this was to bring people together who were working in dark heritage. But one of the wonderful things about Europeana is the diversity of our audience. So we thought we'd just start off with a quick poll to find out who's here and what your interest in this session is. So I'm just going to share my screen, just bear with me. So this is a Menti poll. Some of you may be familiar with this already. And if I just share this in the chat. I now, there we go. So you can, my chat's disappeared. Adrian, are you able to share the details to access in the chat for me? Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, brilliant. So there are two questions. The first one is just a very quick question here. Which of these best describes your role? So to access the poll, if you go to menti.com, it should be on the top of your screen as well as in the chat. And there is a code at the top of the screen there as well. Okay, so we have a nice diverse audience today. The second question we're going to ask you is about why you were interested in this session. So here we go. So this is just an open text question. If you just write a sentence or a couple of keywords, that would be fine. And again, the code is at the top of the screen. Okay, brilliant. So there's some of you working with some content that we could be considered dark heritage, and this term is contested, and we don't have time in this session to perhaps get into the philosophy of it, but we thought it was a term that perhaps covered the widest reach rather than specifically focusing on, say, human rights atrocities, genocide, etc. So we wanted to try and be as inclusive as possible. Wonderful. Oh, interesting. Our local Wikipedia chapter is based on it this past year. That's really interesting. Okay, I'm now going to pass over to Tessa and stop sharing the Menti and open our presentation. And Tessa will be introducing our session.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And from me also, a warm welcome to everyone joining this session. When I came up, or when I was starting to prepare for this session, I was thinking, well, maybe there are going to be like 20 people, 25 people joining. So I'm really glad to see there's so many more of you. Yeah, before we go into breakout rooms and discuss in smaller groups, which for us is really the aim for this session, to share experience and to talk to each other, I'm just going to give a short kind of introduction around the idea for this workshop and how I kind of came up with it. And then, like I mentioned, we're going to go into breakout rooms. And then in the end, we'll come back for a short plenary session, and then also talk about how we can continue this conversation that we're hopefully going to start today after Europeana 2020. So that's the plan. Yeah, so how I came up, or how we came up with the idea for the session. Well, basically, I always have lots of questions about anything, really. But while I joined the workshops that were done by Europeana in June, the building digital capacity workshops, my head just started buzzing from all the input and the interesting things that I heard there. But for me, there's also very many new or other questions that kept popping up in my head. Apart from some of the topics we talked about, like resources and staff training, and some of the things we also heard this morning in the keynote lecture, how important it is to train your staff and to get everyone on board while going into this digital transformation or evolution processes. But for me personally, also working at a site or dealing with dark heritage, namely Bergen-Belsen Memorial, which is the site of the former Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. Very often for me, this question of responsibility also came up. So not only the question, how are we gonna suddenly go online in this pandemic, and what are we going to do and what tools can we use, but also how do we define what we are going to do there, and why are we doing the things we do? And obviously these are questions we are always asking ourselves, and we should always be asking ourselves. But this is something that has become even more urgent, at least for me and for us, while being in digital spaces, because we are very visible there, obviously, and yeah, we should think about how our visitors see us there, and how we can also connect to them. Another important element or topic that came up again was this aspect of appropriateness. For example, in a site where I like the memorial, like the site I work at, we very often discuss what things might not be appropriate for us to do. Some of you might have seen this discussion around TikTok. There were young people creating TikTok videos, and also in general, this discussion of, are dark heritage sites, and in my case, Holocaust sites, compatible with social media, like short-lived, sometimes funny, entertainment-based formats? And you can probably hear from all the things that I'm saying that I don't really have the answers yet. There's all of these questions that I keep answering myself, and we keep asking myself, and that we keep asking ourselves. And I was like, well, Europeana might be the place to discuss these with people also working with dark heritage, but also people that are more visitors and could also give that perspective. And yeah, that's basically the idea. So in a bit, we'll be doing 2 breakout sessions. And maybe, Victoria, you could go to the next slide. So we have the questions or the guidance for the first. So the first breakout session, and both will be approximately 10 minutes. The first one is about sharing experiences. So talking about some of the things we did in the past few months, or you did in the past few months. Some of the challenges and potentials you discovered. And also we put in there the question about responsibility. Has these past few months also encouraged you to think about responsibility in a different way? And also something I didn't mention before, which is also in our title, the finding the right tone. Is this something that you also discuss within the organizations? Like how do you speak with your audiences as well? And then the next one, Victoria, the second the second breakout room is about what have we taken away from these past few months, and are we still taking away? And kind of looking to the future, what have we learned, and how are we going to go on with the approaches that we might have started, or are we going to make some changes? Again, here, this question of appropriateness. And then also this question of how to connect with our visitors, and not just sending out or sending and giving lots of information, but also thinking about these participatory practices and co-creation. And just for your information, these are questions just for kind of orientation and for guiding the discussion. We realize that 10 minutes is not so much, so we don't expect that you find answers. And like I mentioned, I also don't have the answers, but we just want to provide a platform for discussing and sharing some examples. That mentioned sharing examples, some of you might have already discovered the Padlet that we created, and you're very welcome as well to share some of your ideas, thoughts from personal experiences, but also things that you've seen online. You were like, wow, that's great. That's a wonderful example. And also, we will come back after the breakout sessions and discuss a little bit. But because we're so tight on time, we won't have the opportunity to hear all of your statements that are all going to be interesting, I suppose. So feel free to add them in the Padlet so we can read about or read your thoughts there as well. Okay, I'm just thinking if there's anything else I should mention at this point. No, I think we can head to the breakout sessions and then. Oh yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Tessa.
Yeah, I'll just want to say that Victoria and I will be also be joining sessions to discuss with you. So yeah, Adrian.
So I'll go ahead and set you into the rooms now. One moment. Welcome back, everyone. I think everybody's back from the breakout rooms now, Tessa and Victoria. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Yeah, it was very nice to have the opportunity to talk to some of you, even if it was just very short. It was really, time was really flying by. But I think we still managed to touch upon some of the questions raised by us prior to the session, and there were also some other points raised. Something that I take from the session I was in, we talked lots about language again, also something that came up obviously yesterday during yesterday's keynote and afterwards as well in discussion. For this short wrap up, it's really has to be very short because we're running out of time. Just want to ask a few participants to talk a little bit about what they have taken away from the session, and maybe also something that they would like to continue discussing about. And for this, I would like to ask, is there anyone who'd like to share something from the breakout session? I know that Paula might want to speak up later, but maybe there's someone else who wants to say something. You can just speak up. Okay.
Can I say something?
Who's Connie? Yes. Connie, you can go first, and then Paula afterwards. Yes, please.
So what happened yesterday was that people were like, "Oh, this is exoticizing," and this is what's the other one? It's the colonial view on Black people and African pictures, American politics. I think those are very interesting topics to frame as such. Like, you give people the opportunity to say, okay, what in our collection do you really think is exoticizing? It's the white view on Black people, but also I'm always missing the view of the Black people on white people. I think there must be so many stories about, and then these white people came to our country, and I don't hear them and don't see them in the musea. It's always the white view. And if you frame it like, okay, this is how I think exoticizing looks like, or colonialism looks like, if you ask the people, that is a very interesting way of framing an exhibition, I think.
There was a very interesting conversation in our group about the British Library releasing a Black Lives Matter statement, rather, online, as many institutions did, to say we are an anti-racist institution, that we know as museums and heritage sector we have a lot of work to untangle in terms of decolonizing our practices and our histories and our collections. And it was interesting, Maya was saying that there was this Twitter storm related to that, and the tensions of going, being really visible and being on social media, and what role the museum should have in kind of being engaged in those conversations that happen. In this case, it was, I think, the right-wing, alt-right groups jumping on this. And do you engage with them? Do you step back? Do you call out things social media? And there's something there about protecting staff, but also about civic responsibility, about, should we engage with these communities online and allow their voice to be repeated over and over again? And I think it's really interesting that and I think really poignant that Black Lives Matter and the colonial debate that happened yesterday. I wasn't in the keynote, so I only saw some of the stuff on Twitter. As I think it's really poignant that this is coming to this conversation about dark heritage, because it's certainly a really important dark heritage that for me and Tessa, that's not our background, but really interesting to hear some of the stuff on this. Any last bits of feedback we have a few more minutes. I shared lots of links in the chat for carrying on further conversations, sharing some examples, and an event that's coming up next week as well.
I think we have time for just one more question, if possible.
Ismo, you were talking about photographs. I wonder if you might share something on that.
Yeah, I was talking about our past exhibition. It was called Hidden and Public Finland, and just an example of what you can publish online and what probably not, or what you are thinking, what you should think when you are publishing something, whether it's dark heritage or images that you think that are not proper for publishing them online. This was just a case study we did, and actually it was really successful exhibition and much talked exhibition in Finland, and we get a lot of experience and got to look at our collections and thinking about their history and meanings. And it was just a case study, but really interesting. And I would recommend everybody to do same kind of exhibitions, whether virtual or in real institutions. Yeah.
And in our session, Ismo was talking about the kind of power and control of museums over the circulation of images, and so sensitive images of marginalized community groups. And we also talked about images of mass violence, or of naked bodies, etc., and of the dead, and the sensitivity around all of these images and what happens when we kind of release them into social media, where they can be pulled apart from the narratives.
Well,
Paula,
if I may have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll just ask Tessa to back me up if I miss anything from what I already said in the group chat. Well, I was speaking about my experience of I'm a World Heritage student in Germany, and I had the opportunity to visit a temporary exhibition in the Dresden Hygiene Museum, from which I was very positively surprised. They were having an exhibition on race, and for those who are familiar with this museum would know the negative connotation and their part during the time, the dark history of Germany and how they presented race. However, I also spoke about the language. We should be careful how we put things together, how we define them versus us. And I also mentioned that a lot of times it's not about the words, it's not about the terminology we use, but who is using those things, and who is the messenger, who is addressing those words. So we should definitely be cautious of how we put things together, but most of all, be careful who we speak for. Then again, if curating a museum exhibition, we should definitely leave a space where people from different backgrounds will be able to put their own perspectives. And if we dare to put any assumption, to always be careful and to point out this is spoken from this perspective, this is spoken by this person, that person, the background of this community, and never to generalize within the walls of a museum. Uh, that's another thing. And then, yeah, I mean, if I come up with something else, I'll be happy to share. I hope that triggered your interest.
I think that's a great point, Paula, and I think that's one of the points of trepidation I see lots of dark heritage with the big umbrella term institutions have is, there's some co-curation and participatory practices online would be potentially really great for doing something like that, but then it's who comes into that space, and does it get taken over by voices that and remarginalize the people that you were trying to allow more of a platform and space in these museum places. And I think that's one of the big questions around decolonizing. And Violetta's statement was absolutely point on. We can make all the statements we want, right, and go, oh, we've made a statement, we've done that today, tick our box, put it away in the cupboard and carry on as normal, which is not what I think any organization that's really passionate about these things and sees how important they are really wants to do.
I kind of want to clap to that, Victoria.
I'm very sorry to interrupt these very interesting conversations, but unfortunately I need to close this session now. So I'd like to thank Victoria and Tessa for leading us all through these important discussions, and give them a virtual round of applause. So the next session starts in 12 minutes. It's at 1400 hours in Central European time. And after that, we will have a wrap up and further keynote later on this afternoon. So thank you again, Victoria and Tessa, and thank you everyone for taking part in these in this session.